Now to the 2024 presidential race, where yet another candidate has joined the Republican field. Former three-term Congressman Will Hurd of Texas announced his bid Thursday. He's a former CIA officer who calls himself a dark horse candidate. In his announcement on CBS Mornings, Hurd called former President Trump a failed politician and criticized his handling of classified materials.
The fact that Donald Trump willingly kept that material and he wants to be the leader of the free world is unacceptable to me.
Another Republican hopeful businessman, Vivek Ramaswamy, also shared criticisms of former President Trump on Thursday. Here's some of what he told our Nicole Killian.
I think there's a difference between a bad judgment and a breakage of the law. I would have made different judgments than Donald Trump did. That is why I am running against him and every other candidate.
Ramaswamy and Hurd join this list of GOP candidates. There are now about a dozen of them, and we are almost running out of room on our graphic. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins me now from Washington. Bob, thank you for joining us. Will Hurd, okay, another candidacy, but aimed at Donald Trump, and he has that CIA background. He's a long shot, but is there a cumulative nature of all of these now anti-Trump critics who are running against him and being vocal about it?
John, it's good to be with you. If this trend continues, I feel like I'm going to be on your program reporting on rumors about John Dickerson being drafted into the New Hampshire primary, a late entry as a nonpartisan,
if drafted, I will
candidate.
not run.
John, just because you say that doesn't mean there's not a groundswell for you to jump in. But what we're really looking here is a fluid Republican presidential race, a fluid presidential race across the board. Congressman Hurd is someone I've covered in the House. Why is he jumping in now? Because he sees an opening, and he calls himself a dark horse candidate, but he believes that this race is open enough to have a late entry. I just sat down with former National Security Advisor to Trump, John Bolton, now a Trump critic, and he said he's on the edge of the water looking in, whether he should jump in and have his own late entry, because they're seeing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis not gaining enormous traction against Trump. And as DeSantis struggles to really define himself as the Trump alternative in this race, others who are maybe in the single digits are saying to themselves, why not? Get on that debate stage, try to generate some momentum, and if Trump's indicted again in Georgia or indicted in the January 6th case on the federal level, who knows how that plays out? So they're willing to roll the dice.
Rich Lowry, the editor-in-chief of the National Review, wrote in Politico, he wrote this about Donald Trump. He said, the essential challenge for the GOP is that Republicans are growing more attached to a candidate who is harder to elect. Karl Rove, former advisor to George W. Bush, made basically the similar argument in the Wall Street Journal. Is that making any headway among those people you're talking to, this idea that basically Donald Trump's indictments make him even more unelectable in a general?
I think it's harder for the Republican voter that I've encountered out there in the trail to remove themselves from Trump, because he is not just a candidate they like or they share his grievance. He's a global celebrity, and it's very hard to run against a global celebrity. It's hard for these rivals to mount an ideological case against him, because so much of his appeal comes from his personality, his handling of different conflicts and battles politically and personally. That grievance is something that cements people with Trump, and they're not really looking at the details of these indictments. For any other candidate, it would be so serious, you would wonder how they could stay in the race if they're facing they had a federal arraignment just weeks before the first presidential debate. But when I talk to these campaigns, John, they really haven't figured out how to run against someone who is a celebrity and plays by an entirely different set of rules, even though we're almost a decade now into the Trump era inside the Republican Party.
And you spoke with Ralph Reed, the head of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. D.C. candidates are going to talk to his organization. And traditionally, under a traditional race, they might jockey on social issues and reach out to those evangelical voters. But put this outreach in the context you just gave us about Donald Trump. Are there inroads with those voters? And if so, what issues could they take advantage of?
I had a fascinating conversation with Ralph Reed, who's been around religious voters for a long time. And what it comes down to is this. Donald Trump doesn't share the profile of most religious voters in American politics, especially in the Republican Party. But they are sick and tired of losing. And so when they went with Santorum in 2012, or they went with Huckabee in 2008, or Ted Cruz in 2016, they didn't see someone who had the ability politically to carry the ball across the line. Trump, for all of his problems legally, morally, in their view, it doesn't matter because they've made a bargain with him to overhaul the federal judiciary, to overturn Roe v. Wade. And because he delivered on policy, there's a very limited window for people to jump in and say he's not doing enough. Pence and others are saying he's not conservative enough on abortion, but Trump just comes back and says, well, I nominated justices who overturn this law that this ruling that you've been talking about for 50 years. So for even religious voters, if they don't like the indictment, if they don't love how Trump's talked about women, and they look at the E. Jean Carroll case, they still see him as someone who has a deliverable when it comes to policy, and he's offered that to them before, and they like that.
And as a former pro-choice candidate, he has shown he's been able to change his views quickly to win their support. Robert Costa, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, John.